Well, actually, I grew up in Fairlight, and where we're living now is actually just a stone's throw away from where I lived as a child and grew up.
Oh,
And of
wow.
course, then when I married David, I only had to move a couple of streets away. We lived up in Hilltop Crescent at Fairlight, and so actually. During my married life, all I've just done is actually just gone around in a circle.
Fair enough. And how did you meet David?
Oh well, it's how any self-respecting girl meets anyone in Manly on the Corso, of course. No, actually, I did meet him at a dance at North Stone Surf Club. Every Friday night, I used to go to this dance that they had down there, and not that David can dance, but then I found out he did actually come along that night because he wanted to take me home that night. And of course, we've been together ever since, which was, I can always still remember the date, the 4th of December 1954.
And so explain to me how it was you became involved with the local community and local community politics.
Well, of course, I went to school locally. I went to Seaforth Public School and then later on to Cremorne Girls High. But as I said, we were married in 1958, and in 1959, we only just been married a little bit over a year, David was approached to run for council. And I think he was only 26 at the time. And anyhow, everybody said he was sort of a bit like this about it, but his father, actually, to tell you the truth, was sort of, pushed him into it as well. And all his friends said to him, "Oh, well, don't worry, David, at your age you're not going to get elected anyhow, so don't worry too much about it." And of course, and he stood and ended up getting, one of the highest votes, and actually was elected at the age of 26 and still, well, of course there's no Manly Council now, but he held the record all that time for the youngest alderman, as they were in those days, the youngest alderman ever elected to Manly Council and the youngest mayor. Sadly, when I became mayor, I didn't beat that record, being the youngest mayor.
So what impact did that have on your life?
Well, at first, when he was first elected, didn't really have a big impact, but then he was only on the council for 1 year and was actually made deputy mayor, which of course then meant that I was the deputy mayoress, and of course at a very young age. And that was 1961. Well, actually the election was in December 1960, and then of course then the term started in 1961. And the then mayor and Mayoress Jim and Dawn Payton, they were very good to both of us, actually. They didn't have any children. They took both of us under their wing. And of course, in those days, the mayoress was actually quite a significant part of the community. And in the Manly Council chambers, and I think in most council chambers, the mayoress actually had her own office and was very, very busy in the community. So Dawn, who was a great organiser, she was a fantastic woman, she got me involved in everything that she did. She involved me in it as well. And she'd always been a career woman. She was actually had a senior job with CS, the sugar company, Colonial Sugar Company, and she gave that up when she became the mayoress. And she decided that she'd have a series of morning teas and invite the executive of all the different women's organisations. And would you believe it, in those days there were 64 women's organisations in Manly. So 3 times a week she used to invite these different executive members of all these different local women's organisations, and of course, in those days, it's very different today. But there was a staff that did the morning teas. So my job was, I used to do go down to Jasper's bakery in Manly, go in and buy the scones, go upstairs into the kitchen in the council chambers, and I'd put the jam and the cream on the scones. I could always remember doing that, and of course we'd have these series of morning teas and it was fantastic, really, and wonderful for me as well to meet all these great women in all these different organisations. And so for, David was actually deputy mayor for 7 years, and then when he became mayor, and of course I was the mayoress then, and I became even more involved in the community. So, and of course, in those days it was unheard of really to have female mayors, and it wasn't until when did Joan become? 1979, I think it was, when Joan Thorburn became the first female mayor of Manly. So, as I say, I was very involved in the community, and when I was mayoress back in 1983, I was approached by he was the head of community services at Manly Council, and in 1983, and I was mayoress then, he came to me and said, "Oh, Jean, look, I get all these requests," he said, "from members of the community for the council to help them, and it's actually out of our domain, the particular things they come to me for." And he said, "It'd be really great if somebody could set up a committee that these people could be helped." So to cut a long story short, I set up this committee called the Manly District Support Committee, and that had been a committee that had been, back in the 1920s. This committee had started up in Manly, and of course then it petered out. So I resurrected the Manly District Support Committee, and I got a committee together, and they were mainly all Manly businesswomen or wives, like John Humphrey's wife Jeanette, she was on it, and a number of other Manly business people came on it. And I have to say, we went for 30 years, that committee, and during that time we raised a lot of money, and we were approached by one of the teachers at the Manly Village School, saying that so many children, because Manly in those days particularly had a transient population. People would come and they'd stay for a short time and then, perhaps move on somewhere else. And this teacher came to me from the school and said, because she'd heard about our committee, "Do you think you might be able to help us? Because so many children come to the school, they haven't had any breakfast, they haven't had any lunch." So what we did then was we would give a certain amount of money to, actually it wasn't just to Manly, to every primary school in the area, and they could use that money to help any children that perhaps were missing out on perhaps going on an excursion because their family couldn't afford it. So it was a great committee because we just weren't stuck with one particular thing. We could help so many people. Anyhow, then in a couple of years after that, 1984, that's right. So David was then elected as the local state member in 1984, and the Reverend Ted Knopfs had started up at the Wayside Chapel life education, and so school children, primary school children from all over the state could go to the Wayside Chapel to this life education. Anyhow, he then had the idea of having these mobile classrooms, and in 1984 he brought one of these mobile classrooms to Manly, and it was on the Corso and having displayed. And we were invited, obviously, to go down because David was the local member. And Neville Wran actually was Premier at the time, and he had said to to Ted and Offs that they would put it was 250,000. That's right. So there were 5 mobile classrooms, right? And the state government were putting in 50,000, and then the rest of the money to get one of these classrooms had to be raised through the community. So anyhow, to cut a long story short, I took on the task of raising the money to get this classroom. Anyhow, we managed to get one of the 5 classrooms, and of course that was then the beginning of life education on the northern beaches. And we used to visit, we had 40 schools on the northern beaches. We'd spend a week at each school. So that was something I was really proud, probably, that, it was through my efforts that life education started on the northern beaches. And of course, it's still going today, and there's a fantastic thing, and all my grandchildren have been through it, and so I then was asked by Sunnyfield to chair a committee, a fundraising committee, that they were wanting to raise $2 million to build a business and training centre at Sunnyfield. So I chaired that committee, and we raised the money. It took a couple of years, and so that was something else that I was involved in, and it's nice going up there and seeing the plaque up on the wall. And actually Tony Abbott was Minister for Health at the time when they had the official opening, and Tony came and did the official opening of the building. Then in 1995, June 1995, actually it's 25 years this month, 25 years ago this month, I received a call from, I didn't know this fellow, out of the blue I received a call from Dr. Michael Stevens, who was the head of oncology at the Children's Hospital at Westmead. Anyhow, he rang me up and said, look, I've been given your name and number, he said, by one of the parents who has a child under my care who has cancer, because I was wanting to ask if you could get involved with a project that I have got going called Bear Cottage. He said, have you heard of it? And I said, no, I haven't. Anyhow, he explained to me about the Bear Cottage. He was the brains behind it, and he wanted to have a hospice for children with life-limiting illnesses, but he said, he didn't want it to be in the hospital grounds. He wanted it to be somewhere where the parents could go and, in a lovely spot. Anyhow, they had looked at 40 different sites, and before they came across where it is now, up in the St Patrick's estate. And anyhow, he said, we'd love you to get involved. So little did I know what was going to happen out of it, because the little piece of land that they where Bear Cottage is built within the grounds of St Patrick's estate, because it was a seminary, before they could do anything or put in a development application, that piece of land had to be rezoned to hospitals. Anyhow, by this time I was on the council. I'd stood for council in 1987, so that was another thing, because I was on the council. So anyhow, little did we ever think that there would be a problem. Anyhow, blow me down. Then this was 1995, and it was the first time that Manly Council had election for the people would vote for the mayor. And there was this group in Manly at the time called the Residents and Friends of Manly. They used to call themselves the Friends of Manly, but I used to leave the R out of Friends. I can be naughty when I... But anyhow, and I think I proved to be right, because they actually, in 1995, when they had the election, they had the numbers on the council. So when the people from the Children's Hospital came and about having this rezoning done, because it had to go through the council first, then go on to the Department of Planning for the minister to sign off on it. Anyhow, when it came to Manly Council, would you believe, like there were 12 councillors, 7 out of the 12 councillors voted against it. I couldn't believe it. So there were 5 of us that supported. So every time it would come to council, it would get knocked on the head, because they did not want Bear Cottage to be built in the grounds of the St Patrick's Estate, keeping in mind it was taking up such a small amount of space anyhow. But so this went on for I think about a couple of years. So we, in the meantime, we started up a lobby group in Manly, and we called it the Friends of Bear Cottage in Manly. Now originally the hospital, the CEO of the hospital asked me if I would chair the committee, and I said, well, no, I don't think it's a good idea for me to chair it, because me being on the council, and I was the one on the council championing the cause for Bear Cottage. So I said it'd be better if we could find, an independent person, somebody to chair it. Anyhow, we couldn't have got a better person. Gary Pemberton, who lived, and his wife Margaret lived in Manly at the time, and of course Gary at that time was chairman of Qantas, fantastic businessman, chairman of Qantas, chairman of just so many organisations, and also too he was the original chair of SOCOG, as it was called, for they were putting for the Olympic Games. So anyhow, he came on board, and we used to have all these meetings, and he then started to try and negotiate with the council. Anyhow, they still wouldn't matter what you did, they just had a blind eye, ear, anything to it. So he had to sort of think, well, what else can we do? So in the long run, so they got on to Alan Jones. And in those days, Alan Jones was on 2UE, and in actual fact, 2UE had been great support for Bear Cottage, because they raised $8 million to actually build Bear Cottage. Not 1 cent of government funding went into the building of Bear Cottage. Anyhow, so Alan Jones then started on about it. They went, Gary and Dr. Michael Stevens went and met with Alan, and so anyhow, they said, well, Jean Hay on the course of the council is very supportive, and we had actually met Alan back in 1983 when he came and coached the Manly Blues, and of course they won the premiership, so we'd been sort of quite friendly with him. So he rang me up and said, now who are these people on the council that are, stopping this happening for Bear Cottage? And so he'd have me on the radio talking about it, and anyhow, eventually, because all the politicians obviously listen into Alan Jones, so Bob Carr was Premier at the time, so he got onto it, and he invited Alan and Michael and Gary Pemberton into his office. They went in and met with him. Anyhow, he then came onto Manly Council and said, and we've still actually got it was headlines in the Manly Daily. Say yes to it said Premier, say yes to Bear Cottage or lose your planning powers. So they had no choice then, the council, because of what they were doing. They had to, give in the end. Anyhow, Gabriel Kibble, who was the director of Department of Planning, they asked her to be the mediator between the two sides. And I can always remember the day that she came down to the council chambers and we had the mediation on it. And anyhow, they knew that they had to give in. And, those 7 people that were on that council, including the mayor at the time, and would you believe the deputy mayor at the time was actually a doctor, and anyhow anybody could have ever voted against Bear Cottage is just beyond my belief, and it's just the most wonderful organisation. And actually next year we will be celebrating our 20th anniversary. And when I see, and I've been involved ever since, so 25 years this month, and it's just when you go up there and just see what a wonderful place it is. It's just like, it's beautiful, it's a home, and it can up to 10 families at a time. And it's not just for the really bad times. As we always say with Bear Cottage, it's for the good times, the bad times, and unfortunately the last times. But the families can go there and have some respite, and I don't think you could get a better place to have it than up there. And they can go down to the beach. And as one mother said to me one day, Jean, she said, it's a 24/7 looking after a child with a life-limiting illness. And she said, the first time that we came to Bear Cottage, sorry, I get all emotional when I think about it. She said it was the first time my husband and I, she said, we went down to Manly and had a cup of coffee together. So, sorry.
No, it's very impactful.
But it is. I'm shocking. I get every time I go up there, something. It's really awful when you're there, if something happens, if one of the children have passed on. But when you see what help it's given to the families, and help them, with palliative care and that sort of thing, it's fantastic. And I think it's still the first and only hospice for children with life-limiting illnesses in the state. So it's something I've been very proud of, that I have been involved in that. And I think one of the greatest honours that's ever been given to me was when the Children's Hospital asked me to lay the foundation stone for it.
So you mentioned Dawn, and at the beginning of what we were talking about, and it strikes me that she was an important mentor to you at that time. Was she the first mentor for you? Did you have other people that you looked up to and who helped you to sort of build your capability in leadership?
I suppose the very first person in my life that did that was my mother. I had the most wonderful mother, and although she was a housewife, but she always instilled in me and my brother to always, help other people, and she was a wonderful woman. So I think initially it probably came from her, and I was school captain at Seaforth Public School, so I was there was something always in me that wanted to always help. And actually, that's another story I might just tell you quickly. This is quite funny. When I went to school at Seaforth, the Dalwood Children's Home which is just, up the road there from the school. The children, and of course in those days it actually was a children's home. It was like an orphanage, and a lot of children that would be there, perhaps if their parents had passed on or for some reason or other the parents had split up, and anyhow the children from Dalwood used to come to the school, and they were referred to as the Dalwoods. I mean, it wouldn't be PC in these days to do that, but they're always referred to as the Dalwoods. Now, when I first started at school there, every now and then they'd have what they'd call toffee days, and to raise money for the school. And I can always remember the very first toffee day that I went to at the school. I noticed that none of the Dowds, as they were called, none of them had, they didn't have any money to buy toffees. So I went home crying to my father that the day, oh, the poor Dalwoods, they haven't got any money to buy any toffees. So every toffee day, my father would give me the money to buy toffees for all the Dalwood children, because I did that for quite a number of years, going right through the school. Then, of course, when I got to sixth class, as it was called then, now it's year 6, they call it, they had the voting for the captain of the school. Well, I won it hands down because all the Dalwoods voted for me. So we always laugh about it. I said, I must have even known as a child, I was so we often laugh about that. And of course then here I am all these years later. I'm actually the patron of Dalwood, which I have been for many, many years, and still hold that position now. But I always laugh about that. I think that's quite funny. Yes, well, one thing that I really am very proud of is the fact that when I first became mayor in 1999, and of course that was just 12 months before the Sydney Olympics, we were approached by the Olympic Committee to do some fundraising, which we did. Anyhow, one of the functions that we had, I don't know how I came about this book, written by, it was on all the different Olympic Games, written by the Olympic historian Harry Gordon. Anyhow, in this, when I was looking through the book, there was a whole chapter on Manly and Manly Olympians. Anyhow, much to my amazement when I read it, that more Olympians had come from Manly than any other city or town in Australia. And back in 1924, that was when the Olympics were held in Paris, Australia, we would have had a population of around about 5 million then. Australia won 3 gold medals, which in itself, with a population of that size, was quite amazing. But the unbelievable thing was that those 3 Olympians that won those 3 gold medals for Australia all came from Manly. It's quite incredible. So I thought anywhere else we should be celebrating that, because that is just so fantastic. And to think that Manly was only a small local government area anyhow, with fairly small population. So anyhow, I approached John Devitt, who of course was a local, and he had, won a few gold medals for Australia at the different Olympic Games. So I asked, and John was on the Olympic Committee as well. Actually, I think he was vice president at the time. And then this other fellow who lived locally, Kevin Berry, who was also an Olympic swimmer. So I asked them if they would help me in establishing, I had this idea of having something to celebrate the fact that all these wonderful people, Manly people, had been to these Olympic Games. Anyhow, it was great that John, of course, had he could go back and go through all the records. And so we decided, well, we'd started from 1900, when the modern Olympics started. So anyhow, it's a long story. That was another fight I had to have with different people on the council, because some of them, oh no, we don't want that. But anyhow, to cut a long story short, we got the thing going, and we established the Manly Pathway of Olympians, which is along the west. We started off on the west esplanade on the harbour there side. Anyhow, of course, then we went right up with all these plaques and of all the different Olympians and Paralympians from Manly. So it's stretched all the way up to the art gallery. So of course then when we ran out of space on the west esplanade, we then started over on the eastern side. So last count, the last Olympic Games, we had 115 plaques along that Manly Pathway of Olympians. So all those people are on it. The criteria was either you had to be a resident of Manly at the time when they went to the Olympic Games, or belong to a club, either a swimming club or whatever, in the Manly local government area when they actually went to the Olympic Games. So there was that. Another thing, of course, I was very proud and pleased that we did, along with Henry Wong, who was our general manager at the time. We bought the Seaforth TAFE site, which of course had been sitting there for 13 years at that stage, just absolutely, deteriorated. And the state government at the time then had, this was why we decided we wanted to try and buy the site, because the state government, Labor government at the time, had actually zoned that TAFE site area for 3 8-storey buildings to be built on that site. Now, for those of you people who know Seaforth is it's got a village ambience about it. Now, that would have just absolutely destroyed that village ambience in Seaforth. So Henry and I went and met with the minister and said to her, that we were interested in buying the site. Anyhow, she said, oh, well, okay, yeah, well, I'll sell it to you for $9 million. And we said, well, no, we think we should get it cheaper than that, because of the fact that we weren't going to be using it for, development site or that. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, she ended up selling it to us for $4.6 million we paid for it. And anyhow, of course, there had to be a terrible lot of money spent on it. Now, Bupa, I know that there's been a bit of controversy over Bupa, but to give them their due, they did all the building work and the rehabilitating the site. They spent $20 million on fixing up the site, and of course, and then part of the TAFE is for community use as well. So, as I said, we paid $4.6 million for that building. Not only did Bupa then spend the $20 million on fixing it all up, but then they paid us $8 million for the area that they went into for the nursing home. So in actual fact, we've now got that building there, which would be worth an absolute fortune. We paid $4.6 million for it, had all that done for nothing. So in actual fact, the people of Manly, well now of course the Northern Beaches, they have that building, which did not cost them 1 cent in actual fact. We made a profit out of it. So I think that's something I think was, I'm very pleased that we managed to do that. Also, just another little thing that I did was, we used to get lots of requests from residents wanting bus shelters in their street. Anyhow, Manly Council at that stage used to build one bus shelter a year. So I worked out we needed 45 bus shelters for the residential streets, and I thought, gosh, at this rate it's going to be 45 years before they all get their bus shelters. So we went and with one of these the people who go around building all the bus shelters, and so they said, well, okay, if we can put advertising on the ones in Manly, in the commercial area, we will build all these 45 bus shelters for you in all the other residential streets. So overnight we got the 45 bus shelters, plus the very first year. Then on top of it, they were paying us $500,000 a year, $500,000 a year. For the advertising rights on the ones in the commercial area down in Manly. And then, of course, that increased every year with GDP, and to this day, it's still happening. The council, the Northern Beaches Council, now are getting the benefit of that funding from.
And it was all done at no cost to the ratepayers.
No cost at all. So, and then, of course, there's the Andrew Boy Charlton Manly Aquatic Centre, that of course had been the original swim centre, had been built for 40 years, and it needed a lot of work done on it, and also a lot of it, I think we had 37 schools used to use it for their carnivals, and it was very, very popular, but it needed to be expanded. So we did built the new aquatic centre, and the other one obviously is still there, the outdoor pool as well. And there was quite a lot of controversy over it, but particularly there were some people on councillors that I think they were playing more political games than anything, to tell you the truth, but who were anti it, and started up these public meetings, and people were going out protesting. But anyhow, I stuck to my guns over it, and it's proved to be, it's just so popular. It's been breaking all records. Over 700. Look, in the first couple of months we opened, there were over 700 children registered for the Learn to Swim. That's another thing, because we had a gymnasium put in there. Oh, we don't need another gym in Man. We've got so many gyms. It is so popular, the gymnasium there. And because really, when they said, oh, we don't need any more gyms, we've got lots, but there's no other gym in Manly that's got all these lovely indoor heated swimming pools, spas, saunas, gym, the whole lot. Everything's there for just a one visit. So that's been really, really popular. And I think it was in November last year, they told me that just in 1 month they'd taken over $1 million. So it's been very profitable. Of course, the trouble is, though, we've had this problem now with the virus, and it's had to be closed for a while. But it's just been a huge success, and so all the naysayers, even a lot of them now that were against it in the first place, they're down. They've joined up as members and come up to me and say, "Oh, we're so pleased now that you did do it." And it was lovely one day. A little girl about 8 came up to me. We were actually having a cup of coffee, and the father must have said, "Oh, there's Mrs. Hay or something over there." And she came up and she said, "Oh, thank you so much, Mrs. Hay, for giving us that lovely swimming pool." So that's another thing that I've been very proud of. And of course, there was the upgrade along the ocean beach, and there's many other things that I can think of, but of course, I was there for a long time and had the opportunity to do that. Oh, and that's the thing, because I started up we had a sporting committee, and we did a lot of upgrades to a lot of our sporting areas as well, and built clubhouses for them. So, so it's nice to be able to drive around and so. Well, I did do something even